All right, well, welcome and congratulations to all you 40 under 40 superstars. So happy to be with you today. Before we get started, how about we just do some quick introductions? Can you all just introduce yourselves, let everybody know your title and the company that you work for? David, you want to start?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm David. Work over at DoorDash as the head of consumer marketing. I've been at DoorDash almost 3 years, spent about 4 years before that at Pandora. So happy to be here. I'll popcorn over to Matt. How about?
Hi, Matt Fantazier. Need to update my title. I'm on day 7 of a new job at J&J, but I'm the director of digital experience. So great. We have similar titles there for our U.S. skin health brands at J&J, and previously was leading marketing for our baby brands. And Joe, I'll pass it to you.
Thank you, Matt. Joe Rago, Senior Director for Digital Experience and Product Management at Ulta Beauty. Been at Ulta about 5.5 years. This is a new role that I moved into back in January, but excited for what it looks like it's going to have to offer. So happy to be here with everyone else.
And I'm Erin Golden. I am Vice President and Head of Brand Publishing at US Bank, which really covers what you would think of as traditional content marketing, owned and branded content with third parties. I've been with the bank coming up on 5 years, and we serve the consumer and small business owners.
Terrific. Thanks, everybody. So I know this is a pretty common question that happens in these webinars, but I think it's always a good one. We know it's not a straight path to where all of you are today. So how about just two of us talk about, how you got here, the path, the twists, the turns, things that you think the audience might be interested to know. Why don't we start with you, Erin?
Sure. So I have maybe what would have been a less common path to where I am today, but I think it's becoming more and more common. I was a journalist. I went to journalism school and started out in magazine publishing. After a few years in magazine publishing, things obviously started to take a turn in the publishing industry, and our publishing house also had some digital clients and was taking on more and more corporate clients and doing their digital content and content marketing. So I asked to move over to the digital department, just understanding that that's kind of where things were going. And after a few years of working with brands like Optum Health and Delta Airlines, and then 5 years embedded at General Mills, working on their Pillsbury, Betty Crocker, and Live Better America platforms, I decided to make the move to client side and joined US Bank. So since we are creating content every day, we're creating articles, we're creating videos, we're working with partners like the New York Times and Meredith. I feel like even though I'm obviously in the marketing space now, I still use a lot of the skills that I've been using my entire career as a journalist. We still very much take a journalist approach to our content. We want it to be agnostic. It's not all just a big billboard for US Bank. But of course, we do it now to benefit our specific customers and our clients. So I get to do what I always loved, just with some more resources, I guess, than I did previously in my career.
Right, that always helps, doesn't it? Excellent. Thanks, Erin. So David, how about we pick on you next? Do you want to share? I think you've got an interesting background.
Yeah, I am a art school dropout, creative, reformed into marketer. I started, with the intention of being a filmmaker. I did undergrad at Otis Parsons. I went to an art high school. I had every intention of pursuing a art career, and then realized it's actually expensive to live as an adult, and hard to make a living as an artist. And I was supporting myself on credit cards, and realized I should probably get a job. So I started off in I was born and raised in Los Angeles. A bunch of my friends are in the production community, film, obviously. And one of my buddies was at a company called Modern Video, which was a post facility for Warner Brothers. And I was like, I guess I need a job. And he had an opening on the graveyard shift in the tape vault. And I remember spending like the first year of my career working the graveyard shift, sorting analog tapes out and mailing them to stations across the country. And obviously at that point, I was like, I need to find something else to do. As much as I don't mind being up at night, I don't think I want to do this for a career. Somehow figured out a way to get out of the vault up into the editing bays, made a sort of progression through editing, and eventually got into reality television over at Bunim, working on The Real World and The Simple Life, and started to like see a red thread through the things that I was doing. And it was really around like storytelling. So all of the work that I was doing was in the spirit of like, how do you tell great stories? And realize that like, this is a place that allowed me to sort of still keep that interest in what I cared about as an artist, but also transition into something that was like a little bit more sustainable. So I ended up working through a number of different post facilities as an editor, doing commercials, both on the post-production side, the production side, eventually made a transition over to the agency world, then into the consultancy world as a brand consultant / creative director. Ultimately, like one of my friends through, I spent a couple of years at Interbrand, she had moved brand side and hit me up because there was a creative role to join over at Pandora as their creative director. And through that experience, really like fell in love more with the marketing side than the work that I was doing as a creative director, but still maintaining that like that real singular thought of like, all we do is tell stories, right? Yes, you might need to know a couple different things as a marketer. It helps to be able to know what CAC is and optimize for CTAs and get to like some efficiency thing. But like really, I'm telling a story. And honestly, like the journey was just creative to marketer who tells stories and pisses off creatives now, because I work with creative directors and always do the like really annoying thing, which is creative directors. And that's where I'm at now, like trying to not piss off my internal creative team any longer.
I think you chose the right path, David. You're a good storyteller. Awesome. Thank you for that. So why don't we take like a quick turn? These backgrounds are really fascinating. So thanks for sharing them. So, I spent some time talking with all of you individually about, the topic of, consumer acquisition. And all of you have such interesting takes because your industries are very different and your consumers are very different. So this question seemed to resonate with all of you. So let's give it a shot. So many of us have been watching, myself included, way too much Netflix over these COVID days. And, there's this phenomena called the Netflix phenomena, which is the bar has been raised so high for our customers to experience such a frictionless Netflix type of experience. They know us, they know what we like, they make it easy for us to engage. So I'd love to be able to kind of get into a little bit of your stories about, has this raised the bar for your interactions with your customers or guests? And how has it affected your relationship with your customers? So Matt, can we start with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Literally, we were talking about this yesterday with my colleagues, because we were doing some work around understanding, what do we need to do better, benchmarking ourselves, all that sort of thing. And we had the discussion of, we're not just competing with our other CPGs, or we don't need to be better. If we're better than Bayer or P&G, we win. It's consumers are having digital experiences with everybody. They're having an experience with DoorDash. They're having an experience, with their bank, or they're having experiences with Airbnb or Netflix, and the bar is just so high. So they're not going to give us a pass if, well, this was a crummy experience, but I don't expect a whole lot because they're just selling me medicine or body lotion. No, like they expect things to work, them to be easy. And we think about this when we think about, as we create our media, our own properties, how are we making things easy and simple. And we have to think about the exact same things that everybody else is thinking about, because consumers don't care, that they expect what they expect, and that bar is incredibly high right now. So it's pervasive in our thinking internally here, and it's a huge challenge, frankly, but I think it's a good challenge. I think it's raised the bar on everyone, that it's going to force brands to think a lot differently, and really put the consumer at the center.
That's such a good point. Joe, I'd love for you to pick up that thought and let us know kind of what your take is on that for an Ulta guest. Oops, I think you're still muted.
Sorry, I muted for a little bit when my dog was barking outside. He doesn't respect panel sessions. So, but I was saying there's really two pieces that kind of popped into my head when you asked the question, and also when Matt was talking. One around, the Netflix element of things, and I think, a part of it is the, I guess you could call it the ease of use to kind of get into the mode of watching something on Netflix, right? And the ability with how once you're in there, something just automatically starts playing, and sometimes you get sucked into watching something you had no intention to watch. But then obviously there is that very detailed way in which they learn about you and will prompt you with other shows, or in a more generic sense, other experiences that they think you might like based upon your past behavior. So it's like an element of that as it relates to like anyone else would be, how do I make it easy for someone to get into an experience? How do I make it an improved experience every time they come back? So how do I start at a baseline and then learn about them, learn about their interests, and make it a more optimized experience as time goes on, and have that regularity, that hook back to come back to the experience and keep that level of engagement. So that, I think, is one piece that I kind of draw a proxy over to the Netflix example. The other would be as it relates to specifically, different digital experiences, or as I would call it, some more enhanced video content experiences. There is a little bit of a paradigm where, do you look to build that experience and have it on your own properties? Or do you look to leverage some of the different third parties that are out there? Take, for example, we're doing a lot of like live casting, both like one-to-many and one-to-one sort of, conversations that are happening. And, do you build that entirely on your own property where there's a lot of work to kind of build a baseline experience? Or do you say, hey, Instagram has Instagram Live, or Facebook has Facebook Live, like, let me build on top of everything they already have from like a platform perspective, and know that, hey, the experience is going to work. It's going to look good. It's going to be good, interactive, commenting and other things, and really focus on, to David's point, the storytelling, right? And how could our brands, our Ulta team members, our stylists, our advisors focus on purely telling of the story versus having to worry about, is the experience, working or not? Is there, audio, video issues, things of that nature? So it is a little bit of an element where I think you have to pick your spots where having someone entirely within the walls of an Ulta experience on the app or site makes sense. But other times, hey, let's leverage what others have and really focus on the storytelling or the experiential side of things.
That's really interesting. I want to take a quick right turn here. Erin, you and I had a kind of an interesting conversation about brands during pandemic, but it was kind of hard to avoid where your headquarters is for us to kind of really get deep into also civil unrest. So I'm kind of curious if you'd be willing to share a little bit with the group about, how do you stay true to your brand at US Bank, but also be relevant to the community and to the customers that you serve?
Yeah, so we've certainly had a challenging year as a marketing department, first dealing with the pandemic, of course, and then we are a Minneapolis-based company. I personally live about, not even maybe 2.5 miles from where George Floyd was killed. So we were really dealing with not only the effects of the pandemic, but an incredibly hurt community. But we're also a national brand. So there's our immediate community, and then there's, how we present ourselves brand. So we just had to be extremely agile in the last year. I think more than certainly at any time in my previous time at US Bank, we had to stop and switch and pivot on campaigns, and then stop and switch and pivot on campaigns again. But really at the end of the day, it came down to as much as we had always put our customer at the center, we couldn't do anything but put our customer at the center this past year, because we really had to drop our own ambitions at the beginning of 2020 and pivot our campaign and our editorial content to pandemic-focused content and a pandemic-focused campaign that served our customer. And then we had to stop and pivot again last spring and really change our focus to what our community needed, which was our support, really more from a CSR and DE&I space. And they needed support, and they needed funds, and they needed messaging from us that said, we are here for you, and we're going to continue to be here for you, whether it's a pandemic or whether it is alongside you in the social justice movement. So we, more than ever, it was, yes, there are US bank priorities, but those just need to go to the wayside, or those need to be, put on the back burner while we serve our community first. And I think that certainly our marketing department benefited from that, because it made us better marketers. It's always easy to say you put the customer first, but then, those business priorities and everything start creeping in. So we really couldn't do anything but in the last year. And it made us explore new channels. We put out a podcast that is focused on the social justice movement that talks about its ties to finances, but is in no way, shape, or form a financial podcast, called Real Good. We're doing more video work in the community and showing stories of small business owners and people who are rebuilding after the destruction in Minneapolis. So it's made us better storytellers. It's made us more customer conscious. And it's really been a year of learning.
Wow, that's pretty powerful. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's stick with the COVID learnings. I mean, we're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, right? Hopefully. And so we all learned, we all had to be agile. But what I'd love to know from each one of you is there something that you learned during COVID that you think is such a strong learning and is so true to brand that you want to carry forward as we get out of this time frame? So David, do you want to start?
Yeah. God, learned a lot of things. First, this thing is hard. Like it's incredibly hard, and there is no like one path that's going to tell you like, if you go down this thing, you're going to win, or you're going to succeed, or you're even making the right decisions. I think like the thing that we've taken away, and the thing that I've really tried to express to my teams most, is like, we're going to get things wrong, and that's okay. The lesson is in the learning, right? So try things, put the customer at the center of it, of course. Lead with empathy, of course. Think about like how we're going to market and what we're saying, but understand that like what we think about today will change tomorrow, and it'll change the next week. And if we even try to predict what's going to happen in a month, we're setting ourselves up for like abject failure. So really like it's been this like, I think the biggest learning has just been around like how to stay flexible and how to like not hold things too tightly, right? How do you hold a thing with like very loose arms, knowing that like it's going to change? And then the other part of that is just being able to hold two ideas in your head at the same time, right? Like understanding that some of the things we're going to do will address one part of the audience and in contradiction to something that needs to be done on the other side, and that like we need to be able to do both things. I have plenty of examples of that, but I think like the note there is just like really, I don't like using the word agile, but like how do you stay like, I guess, agile in the context of like really like turmoil and change.
That was excellent. Matt, what's your take on that? One thing you'd keep?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked a bit about this already, but I think just in terms of understanding what matters to your consumer. And for me, when I was leading our baby brands, my core consumer still had to go to the hospital during a pandemic to give birth. So talking about lotion and shampoo and things like that, they didn't care. Like we had to really put ourselves in their shoes and understand in this moment, especially early on, if you rewind a year ago when so much was unknown, we didn't have the vaccinations and all that we have today. I mean, unbelievable anxiety. Having a family and giving birth are, scary things to begin with. Now, put on top of that, there's a pandemic. You're worried about getting a bed, or is your partner going to be able to be in the delivery room with you? Like, what to expect? We had to totally basically throw out our marketing plan, like I think all of us probably did to some extent, and say, like, does this matter to my consumer, and what do I want to say, and what do I need to be as a brand? And we pivoted to start talking about, these are the things you should be expecting at the hospital during COVID, and what to bring and what to ask your doctor. We just launched a whole partnership with Scary Mommy and the Dad about helping parents talk to their kids about racism. This is stuff that matters to our core consumer. We still need to talk about product, and we make unbelievable products that help parents, but it hasn't been top of mind, and we've just had to acknowledge that and move on. And it's worked, by the way. Like, we've had a great response. We've connected with our consumers. They're still buying product, but what we choose to use our short and fleeting time with them to talk about, we have to be extra choiceful about. And pandemic or not, I think that's a great lesson. This last 13 months has been, you will never forget it. It'll be in the history books, right? But I think when things get back to normal, or whatever normal looks like, it's a great lesson on consumer centricity, and it pays off to really think, what do they actually need, what matters. So that's something I'll never forget.
Excellent. Thanks. Joe, would you have something you'd like to add to that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think I kind of have two parallel paths, really. One is if you look at like Ulta as a retailer, there was kind of the evolution of the retail journey during the last year. So, I mean, we went from, late March last year, where we made the decision to close all of our stores across the country for, roughly, 2 months. And, the immediate ramification for that was we went from being a 1,200 plus store retailer to a single store retailer, and that single store being our e-commerce channel. So, we basically went into a situation where, how do we message guests? How do we make sure that they're aware of the digital, shopping experience and capabilities? But also, we had to think through other things because, for example, we had a huge surge in first time, digital shoppers, which was great. But then it led to other things like, guest service call spikes around, how do I find my Ulta loyalty number and things of that nature. Or it basically turned our distribution centers into like Black Friday every day, right? For a period of time where the demand was such huge through this single channel. How do we make sure that both the guest experience is as optimized as it could be from a capacity perspective, but how we make sure that our own internal teams, whether it's distribution centers, guest services, other impacted groups, were properly supported during this sudden shift in where the guest was shopping from. And then, as things progressed and we went from having no stores open to some stores open, and that was more of a, how do we tell the guests basically the right information about their closest store? Is it open or not? Could they go inside or not? That sort of thing. And then that kind of evolved to then, hey, all of our stores are open to some capacity, but there's still differences. And, we had luckily launched a buy online, pick up in store program, about a year and a half earlier. And that was a huge spike in demand last year. But then we had to evolve it. How do we, take advantage of curbside delivery, for the guests that don't want to go inside the store? So it was definitely from a pure shopping kind of journey. It was definitely a lot of listening to the guest needs and being able to quickly respond to that in a way that was much more quick to market than we normally might be. But then there was also ancillary things that the guests were talking about or had in mind. How do I stay connected with my beauty advisor or a beauty advisor in a one-to-one aspect when I can't be there in person? So we listened and we tested a lot of things quickly. And because I think there was an element of finite time, like you could look at, any really kind of metrics from last year, and you could look at the early part of the pandemic where everyone wanted to do more video things, right? Because they couldn't be face to face. But then by August, September, everybody was so burnt out on being on camera for work, being on camera for happy hours with friends, that no one wanted to be on camera. So if you took what you learned in March and said, hey, let's do this in 6 months, it was kind of too late. So it was a very rapid, like, what is important now, but then if I'm going to act on it, I need to act on it now versus putting it on the shelf because it might not matter later.
Wow. I mean, this has been a challenge to all of your experiences. Erin, I'd love to hear your take on it from a financial institution's perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to speak a little more specifically for my team and my creative group, because we do provide a lot of educational content. We also do a lot of storytelling, especially with our branded content partners. And we really had to put ourselves in the mindset of, we of course have our segments, and, we have the folks we've always been speaking to, but we really have a tale of two Americas right now, where you have people who were, and I think the percentages are somewhere around like 35% of people who have been majorly financially impacted by the pandemic. And then you have the rest of folks who either haven't been impacted at all, or who are actually in a better financial place, because either they're not spending the money on vacations and commuting that they once were, so they have more money in their pocket. There are people who have benefited from a healthy stock market, of course. So we've when we're creating content and when we're creating our messaging, we really have to find that balance of how can we make sure we're serving the people who are hurting right now and who will likely be hurting for, if you're a small business owner, they're thinking it's going to be 5 years before a lot of small businesses are back to pre-pandemic levels. If you are in certain industries like service industry, maybe you had to change what your job was or what your career was. So there are going to be people that, even if life gets back to normal in the next, few months, a few quarters from a business perspective, their financial situation is going to be impacted for the foreseeable future. Whereas there are quite a few people who are not having that. As soon as they're vaccinated and restrictions are lifted, it's like, things are back to normal for them. So that is going to carry forward for us really for the next few years, where we have to make sure that we're not weighing people down with the memories of the pandemic, but also not doing a disservice to those folks who will really be impacted for years to come by ignoring their situation. So we're going to have to really weigh those two groups and make sure that we're talking to both of them and engaging with both of them.
Excellent. Thanks. So this next question is really just for any one of you. We talked a little bit about, trends or exciting things that we're looking for the future. Who has something that's top of mind for them that they're excited about, for a trend that they think is coming and they're ready to go for it?
I can jump in. I think the thing that I'm excited about is really social commerce and live streaming just in general. Over the last number of years, it's been kind of petering along, and it's been accelerated in the last year, partly because of COVID, but also partly because the infrastructure exists now. It wasn't as ingrained in all the platforms, but now Facebook, YouTube, you name it, like everyone's basically, Snapchat has added commerce tools to their platforms, and consumers are getting used to it. The stat I saw was it's grown about 1% to 2% a year for the last number of years. It grew 40% last year. So we've clearly passed the tipping point of acceleration, and social's where people are, and it's driving discovery. I saw another stat that showed that it's like 27% of consumers discover new products on social media. It's the same as television. So we've reached a point where it's like, that is where people are going. That's where people are shopping, and how brands can tap into that, I think, opens up a lot of really interesting possibilities, especially as you get it farther down the line to the combination of content and commerce, where people are able to really shop and interact with brands within the content they're consuming. Could create some really interesting experiences depending on your category.
So true. So true. Buying off of Instagram is becoming a new habit, right? Yep. Anyone else?
Well, I mean, I guess Julie, to your point, I mean, you could ask even all of us, right? Like, raise your hand if in the last week you saw something on social that you instantly bought, like, yes, like multiple times, right? And you could say, how many times did you see something on TV in the last week that you instantly bought? And I can't recall the last time like that same sort of, proxy happened. Or if I did get a cue from TV you go look it up on your phone, right? Whether it's through social or through, direct websites. So it's kind of like everything is largely driving, to different channels, but it's, I feel like Instagram knows me, right? And they recommend the right random things at any time. It might be, like a pool floaty one week, and I'm like, that's perfect. I need that, and the amount of randomness I bought in the last year is, largely driven by whatever sort of magic algorithms that they have.
I've been encouraged by, so the pandemic accelerated mobile app adoption for our customers. And for those of us who live on our apps, it seems crazy that it was actually really difficult for us to get people to download the app and work through the app, even though we have a really fantastic app, and it's an award-winning app. It works really well. It's certainly better, than a lot of our other digital experiences. So we were really struggling to get people to adopt it until the pandemic. And now that we have accelerated that adoption, the best place we can interact with someone from a personal level is on that mobile app, because it's an authenticated experience. Obviously, we can serve up content that's specific to that person more easily. We can just connect with them on another level than we could in the online banking or even a branch experience. So it's now allowing, we've kind of been preparing ourselves for this to make sure that we're creating content that can speak directly to people if it's served up once in their app. But I'm excited to see that actually in practice now, that we're finally getting people to download that super handy tool that makes their life so much easier. That seems like it should have been a lot easier to get people to do that, but it took a pandemic to get a big spike in adoption.
That's an exciting development for your customers. Love it. David, how about you?
I have a very specific one that I'm just so happy about. QR codes are back, and like, finally, I feel like there's somebody sitting in a room who's been like screaming from their roof for like 20 years saying like, QR codes, trust us, it's going to be great. I just like, it's so rad. But like, to the thing of like, can you order from TV? Can you, like, I think that like with this widespread adoption of QR codes, we actually have an opportunity to like get back to some of that like initial promise of the thing that was lost when, everybody was like, I'm not going to download an app to take a picture of a thing. Now it's just like, you just point your camera and it like works. That's like super specific, but I don't know, maybe I'm a champion of the QR code. And it's finally
Hey, it works. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, it works now. It's so cool.
That's great. Anything else come to mind for you?
I mean, that's like oddly the thing that I care most about. But yeah, I agree with like what everybody else said. I think that there's like so much richness in all of that.
That's terrific. Well, I'm getting the warning light that we're almost done here. So, I just want to thank you guys. You've all been so open and willing to share what you know. Obviously, you have some great experiences and you represent some awesome brands. So thank you so much for all of the time and feedback. And there are some questions that were listed here, but I don't think we have time for them. But I will shoot them over to you because I think it'd be interesting for you to understand kind of what the audience is asking. We hit a lot of the high points, but I appreciate all of your time. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For having us.
Oh, hey, wait, they just hit us and said, answer questions. Hey, you want to do it?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's get weird. Let's go.
All right, the people have spoken. Let's do it. All right, number one. To be more inclusive as the industry. Does anybody feel like this speaks to them?
Yeah, I mean,
Oops, I can't hear you. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Oop.
Okay.
I can hear you now. Yeah.
Sure. I mean, I think, yeah, with everything, we've been moving in that direction. I think it's just the spotlight's on it now, even in a bigger way than it has before. And, we think about just general, marketing. We want our consumers to see themselves in our advertising. They want to see that these are brands for us, be it where they're banking products they're bringing home with them, or where they're shopping for beauty products. We want them to feel like we're talking to them and we're being inclusive. So yeah, absolutely, it's been top of mind for us, but even more so, it's the bar is raised on this too.
Excellent. Anybody else want to grab that one? All right, let's grab one more question. How has the customer journey evolved in recent years? How have the changes in your customer journey impacted your approach to digital media? Well, that's a broad one. Yeah, who would like that?
I mean, I would say there's so many differences. I guess I don't know where to start, but I think, I think the quick answer would be, we know that guests are going to come into the Ulta digital experience from a number of different angles and for a number of different reasons. So you have your traditional browser search result to product page sort of flow, and kind of keeping that on its own and kind of at core. I think there are more tangential experiences now that lead someone into a shopping journey with us. So it could be things like virtual makeup try on or virtual skin analysis, which for us were capabilities that we had for 3 to 4 years, but really it took a pandemic to bring the ability to virtually try makeup on to like the masses. And it wasn't that we newly did something, it was the use case was forced by the pandemic. But then to an extent, that's how do we take advantage of that opportunity? It's like we were waiting for like 3 years or so on that opportunity, and then all of a sudden it's here, and how do you take advantage of it? So I mean, David mentioned QR codes before, and we've done more around QR code signage and messaging in store, because guests right now are still all required to have masks in all of our stores. So how do you get someone into awareness and into an experience where they know, hey, when I leave the store, I could try on all these products I was looking for at home and see which color might be the best fit, and then order it online, or be able to order it and pick it up at store later. So I think there's little elements of it that you really have to like identify and capitalize on, but then also think through how does it tie together with the rest of the journey, and not just be singularly focused on one individual element.
That's great. Did either of you want to add something to that? It's a broad
I
question.
would add, yeah, well, I'll just I'll add, because I think this actually answers another question that I had seen someone ask about podcasts. The customer journey is obviously no longer linear. We all know that, but we can bring people in through new channels we never thought we'd bring them in a few years ago. I never thought I'd be producing a podcast for US Bank as part of our brand campaign. And it has been really successful beyond our expectations, but we allowed ourselves permission to try something new, because we had stories to tell. We wanted to tell some CSR stories, and we tried doing it in a traditional TV ad format, and it just didn't work. It didn't work in 30 seconds. We couldn't tell that story in 30 seconds. So we purposefully looked for channels where we could tell those stories, and came up with podcasts, which are obviously now bringing in a whole new group of potential customers. So just allowing yourselves to try new avenues, and understanding that brands are content creators now, and you can really create any kind of content you want if you have the dollars